Good afternoon and welcome to Good Journeys Tarot. It's so good to have you here live and in the playback. This is 78 cards in 78 weeks, in which we talk about what I'm studying regarding one of the cards in the tarot as I mock up what my deck might look like. And this week we are looking at the Eight of Pentacles. And we'll be talking about that more in just a minute. But before we do, as always, I'd like to share some of what's been going on here. One thing is anxiety. I don't know why, because everything's pretty much status quo here, but it just seems like I just want to hibernate, right? And I think a lot of people get that way this time of year. One of the things I did, which I shared on IG this week to try to manage some of that anxiety, was I made a list of like all the things that are running through my mind that are wrong or that could be better or that kind of thing. And then next to them, I came up with something that was good, right? And that was going right or that I could be grateful for. And that helped me that day, right? Maybe I need to do that exercise every day. Well, and you should give that a try too if your anxiety is getting the better of you. So what's going on here? Well, let me share my link tree, which should be in the comments there, to walk you through some of what's happening. Okay, first of all, I have set up my Make Playing Cards shop. Now, some of you may have seen the post as well as the video of my learning Lenormand, which came out of my desire to learn the Lenormand and not finding a deck that really was helpful for me. And it is now live. The border issue on the copy in the walkthrough has been fixed, so it's even all the way around now. And it's just in shrink wrap. I ended up not going with the tuck box, which I hated, or the plastic box, which wouldn't stay shut, because the tin is almost as much as the deck itself. So that is out there. So you'll find that on my link tree. Another thing that you'll find on my link tree is a link to the Cartomancer magazine, where my second article will appear in December. It is currently available, and currently on sale is a few copies of the summer edition, which had my very first published article ever in it, The Myth of Duality. And so check that out if you have an opportunity. One last thing that has happened this week is that my latest newsletter has gone out. And here you will see a link where you can subscribe to that newsletter so you can hear what's been going on and what's coming up here at Good Journeys Tarot if you're not already doing so. So today's guest really needs no introduction because she has been a fixture here at 78 Cards in 78 Weeks for quite a while, contributing wonderful ideas to improving my cards, as well as thoughts on the individual cards here in the chat. And she is a returning guest, having been here for my anniversary. Let's welcome Toni from Antoinette's Intuitive Tarot and Jewellery. Welcome.
Hello. Lovely to be here. Thank you. Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for having me back.
Yes, I'm so glad that we get to spend a whole session together.
Yeah, nice tips, by the way, about the anxiety. I liked that.
Yeah. We do have some people popping in already. There is the Cartomancer magazine. I believe that's Amber, who will be here next week with us talking about the card that Toni will choose at the end of this experience. Clementia's Creative Cartomancy is here. Welcome. So glad to have you. And we're talking about the Eight of Pentacles today. And this is a card that I say this about many cards, but this is a card I've actually been kind of dreading because I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. I'll be honest, when we get to the shadow side of this card, I can more relate to it. It's definitely been more my experience and whatnot. So do you have any cards that stand out as far as like reminiscent of this particular image from the Smith-Waite?
I don't have so most of my cards don't follow that exact image anymore that I've pulled out today, but the one that my fun tarot deck would be the Halloween tarot in a tin. So that 8 of Pentacles in there, which is almost identical, except for it's got pumpkins in it. That's like my fun element on this card. And then obviously all the cards that I have out since, because I didn't really train with the Rider-Waite-Smith. I trained with Deviant Moon, which I have left out today as well. I've left that off the list because I know it's not everyone's cup of tea. And then after that one, I think was the Lightseers was my first introduction really to working with a sort of RWS space. Again, that's not so, it's not quite, is it? So the 8 of Pentacles in this deck is one which I resonated and learned to resonate with the most. And that was one I think that taught me that shadow aspect of this card, as you said, which I know you have in your pile. Sorry, that's my partner going out.
Oh, no problem. My dog is coming to pay attention to me all of a sudden. Yes, a lot of decks do follow suit in creating 8 Pentacles, and the creator at work, of course, Jamie Sawyer used herself in her deck. And that kind of theme of creating Pentacles.
So here's
the out of hand.
Yeah, so this is what she's doing in that card that you just showed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the idea behind these cards. So she's creating what she's sat hard at work with there.
Yeah, and that's an idea that I kind of stole for my mock-up of my deck. Here in the Curious Travels, again, making those Pentacles, hard at work. And we even see here a jeweler, kind of reminiscent, even though this is a Thoth-inspired deck, the Urban Tarot kind of follows suit. And then we kind of get ideas that are adding to that, where, for example, here it's an artist versus a craftsman, which is a different kind of craftsman, I suppose. And rather than pentacles, it's worlds or globes, earths. Here is the card that you mentioned earlier that you love. So tell us what you love about this particular 8 of Pentacles.
So this one taught me more the shadow aspect. It taught me about burning the candle at both ends, and probably gave me a bit more of the aha moment with this one, because the moon phases, which are actually quite important to the 8 of Pentacles, it seems like running through the 8 moon phases. And that might be the time it takes to set a good skill in place, or to learn a technique, or muscle memory, perhaps. So there's lots of things there, but really it was about, you know, being diligent and honing what you're up to, but do pay attention to the balance, you know, not overtiring yourself versus what you're learning, because you can become exhausted, can't you?
Sure, absolutely. Especially since it's normally something that you're repeating over and over to try to perfect. And yeah, that is lovely. I didn't really pay attention to that. I looked at it and went, okay, so instead of creating something like a pentacle or an artwork, it's actually someone learning about herbalism, is what it kind of looked like to me. Which learning about anything is an idea that pops up a lot in some modern decks. Here we see a more prehistoric, perhaps, person crafting things, making things in a cave in the wild wood. A deck that I don't always pull out because it's its own system, but sometimes it does correspond with other systems that we're studying, like the Thoth and the RWS. The Penumbra does a similar thing with actually cave drawings, getting that artwork right on the wall. And so a lot of them boil down to watch me work. Right? Watch me work. I'm going to do the thing, even if I have to do it over and over. But another idea that comes up is skill and perseverance, which we see here in the Tarot of the Twirling Hands. And that's where we get that Lord of Prudence, that idea that we are practicing something and taking our time and trying to do it right over and over. So what are some of the cards that you pulled out for us?
Okay, so one I've already shown you.
Okay.
So it is this one by Jamie Sawyer, so the Out of Hand Tarot. And what I've just written down, so I've made notes on each card here. So I've just put, obviously this one shows us that skill because it's repetitive. You can see she's stamping out the same thing. So that's got that kind of muscle memory element to it that you need in order to hone that new skill, because you're not going to get it straight away first off, are you? So you need to change a few things. And to do that, there's perhaps that diligence the skills that you need to hone. Crafting, so the craftsmanship that might be related to this card. It could be that you're an apprenticeship, but learning that kind of repetitiveness makes the skill second nature and much easier to complete and to do. I think that card, to me, sort of does show it quite well. And I think that also is one of the cards that reminds me, or linked in after you mentioned it already, actually, links to the Three of Pentacles, that craftsmanship that you see in the Three of Pentacles. And this one, to me, sort of links to that. It puts that link in that you've already said before. And I was like, oh, I need to think about it. But that one joins the dots up for me.
Yes, absolutely.
Do you want a few more? Or?
Sure. Show us a few more of yours, and then we'll look at some of mine, which are a little more, take a little bit of a different approach.
So one which we both have is the Lily White Eight of Pentacles. It's just a beautiful, beautiful card. So we couldn't not really show this one. And I'll just try and find my notes because I didn't write my bit. Sorry. So the Eight of Pentacles on this one. So of course you've got your bumblebee, so you've got that busyness in here. And again, that sort of comes back to that craft and being good at what you're doing and knowing what you're doing. But the competence, and there's a lot of like productivity, and bees are very disciplined in what they do when they go out and about to do stuff, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's a common theme you'll see in the Eight of Pentacles and other decks, like Here's the Spacious Tarot. But you also see it sometimes in the Three, which is associated with craftsmanship and mastery and whatnot. So which deck is this?
This is the Three of Pentacles from the Unfolding Path Tarot by Athena Arcana. And that's why, because this one linked to me, it joined up to the Lily White Eight of Pentacles, whereas the Eight of Pentacles in this deck is different again. And this shows perhaps, so this could be somebody's career, or it could be a hobby. Because sometimes people do dancing as hobbies, don't they? It's not always their career, but I thought that kind of showed double elements. Although it has this really interesting kind of aspect to it, I think, here. But the time and effort, and again, that dedication, because we know that dancers and ballet dancers are so dedicated to what they're up to. And then there's that purpose and goal of what you're doing and what you're, obviously stretching your body to do and create here. So I just think it's, quite interesting. And the fact that it brought the hobby element, not always the work element.
Yeah. This one, which I'm about to show, is from the Mystic Garbage. And you had mentioned stretching your body. She actually used a stripper for this card. The idea that even though this is not something that most people would look highly upon, it is hard work. It is a skill that you have to master, that you have to work at. To perfect. It's not as simple as just getting up there and swinging around the pole. You have to know what you're doing, or you really will hurt yourself.
Do yourself a mischief.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of that, moving from that work, we get a lot of that idea of the student. Is a direction that many will go. For example, in the Robin Wood, instead of being an older person, it's actually a child who is doing this repetitive task. And that shows up in a lot of, like the Saucerabito here, the person trying to master their spiritual knowledge. Equating this a bit with the Hierophant, which is something that a lot of books will do, because the Hierophant represents Virgo. This card is Sun in Virgo, and therefore they have a relationship there of attempting to master something. And in this case, knowledge versus, which is something that gets associated, I think, with Pentacles a lot. Here it is again in the Numinous Tarot, where Tomes is actually the suit for it. And another way that it shows up in the Spirit Keepers is, they call it the Journeyman, which is actually that next step above Apprentice. This is the person who is working towards becoming the master. And here the idea of a metaphysical energy, trying to form a metaphysical idea or concept versus, say, a physical object, kind of drawing astral energy together. I thought was interesting idea. And I love the original version of this. The runes, which I cannot remember which ones they are off the top of my head, had specific significance to this card and the meaning for me. And so I still love this particular version of her deck there.
Yeah, so with your hobbies there, so with the Gentle Tarot, this one I think again could be either or, but a more calming, meditative state perhaps of the Eight of Pentacles, you know, just allowing the work to flow through you, or you can kind of go into trance, can't you, when you're doing hobby drawing. You just have to let go and allow it to come through. So I think that has like a very nice relaxed environment in it for the Eight of Pentacles. But then going to your kind of teaching aspect of Eight of Pentacles that you were saying, with the Barbara Walker Tarot, surprise, surprise. With this one, it has a slightly different feel about it. So here you have, you can see like I don't know, we call that a mother figure, a crone figure, a teacher, somebody passing down knowledge to the younger person. So I'm just going to say mother-daughter in this one. And it also, in this deck, it talks to the Seven being a failure. So this is about a different approach, taking a different approach of knowledge and learning in order to move forward into the Eight. And it's an extension of your understanding and that kind of doctrines, new knowledge and enlightenment, which is sort of part of this. And of course, the Sacred Rose up here in this particular deck also has its own meanings as well, being a Barbara Walker deck, of course.
It reminds me very much of a Hierophant, although in this case being women instead of a man traditionally, and it's from a different angle, but there's still, because of that stained glass in the background, that Sacred Rose, it still has that kind of feeling for me.
Absolutely, it is still in there, isn't it? Quite heavily influenced. But yeah, I mean, I have 3 other cards, but I don't know if you want them all.
Okay, sure. Why don't we look at yours and then I'll show my favorite one.
Yeah, do you know, I don't know if I have a favorite today. I will admit that.
Yeah, sometimes there are cards that just stick out to me. About a year ago, I actually did a thing where I put together a deck of 78 cards from all of my various decks, choosing a favorite from each. And it's something I probably should revisit because I have new decks in my collection that I use frequently and that I probably like more than previous ones. In fact, I usually don't add a new deck to my collection unless it has a card in it that adds something that I've never seen before, right? I'm not really in the market for a bunch of clones of things I've already seen, right? At least personally.
No, do you know, that probably is a more eloquent way of putting what I do. Whereas I say it's the art, because that would be why I collect it. It's because the art has something different about it that adds to the meaning without me realizing them, perhaps, or attracts me. So I have Poppy Palin's Everyday Enchantment.
Okay.
And this one, you have that manual skill and dexterity again being shown, which is, I think, what we do associate with the Eight of Pentacles the most, isn't it? Is a manual skill, material kind of workings with the hands. And then in this face here, I think the faces are so well drawn. You can see like the excitement of, it's almost like there's a teacher and apprentice again in here, but you can see like the excitement of somebody who's being able to do it, like they're actually achieving what they're up to. And that methodical approach again with that, you know, like I said, muscle memory being created by doing something over and over again. But when you don't get it right, going back to the Seven, obtaining a mentor just to help you put the pieces together in a different format to learn to move forwards is always a really good thing to have with the, I suppose, the background or the question or the approach on the Eight of Pentacles, perhaps, for people.
Sure.
One of my favorite decks, which I do actually recommend this to people who want like a multi-approach system, is the Star Tarot. Do you have that one?
I don't. I've looked at it several times.
So it has kind of pips and all sorts in it. And I think it's just such a beautiful deck and well done. So this is this one has the 8 moon phases in it, which you can probably see going around in the mandala, and that is about weaving your magic. I haven't actually read up the actual significance to the 8 moon phases and why 8, but I'm guessing that is part of the muscle memory creation learning, and learning to follow your own guidance and compass. I think is also kind of shown in here as well. And with that, I've just kind of written down to go with it the lessons of patience, perhaps honouring the process, because you can't make it go faster. If it's 8 days, it's 8 days. Tough, you know, you can't do it in 3. You have to do the full cycle, a bit like Rochelle at Amethyst Ascension made some kefi. Is it kefi? Which is a process that takes a number of days. You can't rush it, and then it's like an incense and you burn it. So she made that, and she had to do it. I probably got the wrong name, but but that was like her process. So this one reminds me kind of her. I think of her going through that process and how you couldn't speed it up, you couldn't rush it, and it had to be just so, whether you wanted it to or not. And my last card is, so this is the Tarot of Vampires. Which I don't use much at all. It's fairly new to my collection, and I got this for the book, I'll be honest, the guidebook. And it is actually a really good guidebook. The guidebook is amazing, just like the Star Tarot. That guidebook is fascinating. But this one has this weird sort of, how do I get the shine off him? So this is a really weird looking 8 of Pentacles, although it's called Skulls. So this person is manifesting in a very different way to what we've seen in all the other cards. So he is bringing in, he's doing that magical creation. He's harnessing, bringing the elements together is what you see in this card, or that's what I'm seeing. And there's that change, rhythm, balance that's needed for this. It's an industrious kind of card, and applying care and discretion to what you're doing, because obviously if you overdo the elements or add too much salt to the pot, you're going to ruin what you're creating. And that's something I sort of see here, and he is actually summoning something else, but I think you get the idea of that magical magician-esque vibe in there as well, bringing your magician into your like everyday creation. So those are my cards.
So my favorite is the Slow Tarot, and it has that idea similar to the moon phases in that it follows the life cycle of a butterfly as in the creation of the stained glass window. But one of the things that I really loved about this is that it brings in that concept of family, which is something we associate with Pentacles as well. And so rather than just the apprentice creating things, it's a family. So there's generations here teaching one another a craft, so to speak. And I just loved how the cycle of the butterfly added to that. And you see each piece developing, which is really, I guess, the epitome of this card is that it's about developing a skill or developing perfection at what you're doing. Though some people would consider that the shadow side, being perfectionist. But I think you do have to reach a certain point of ability in this card, right? Because through your repetition and doing things over and over and over again. And I like what Dagda in Sacred Soul says here. So the 8 moon phases could be about sacred geometry. 8 is the infinity symbol. You live and learn, and you live and learn again. You know, it's perpetual. And I like that. I think that's absolutely applicable here. And I think it even applies to the life cycles of the butterfly. I love butterflies, right? You know, I like sunflowers, but did you know I like some butterflies? And so I will tell you, one of the things about this card is that for a long time, I struggled with the 3 and the 8 because of reading different books about the tarot and watching different people's approach to the tarot left me a little bit confused. Because when I look at these cards side by side, if I'm reading intuitively and looking at it, I don't immediately get that the 3 would be a master and the 8 would be an apprentice. To me, I've always looked at it as like, because this is teamwork, cooperation, feedback, that this was the apprentice. And that because this person is doing the same thing over and over and doing it exactly the same masterful way each time, this would be the master. But then you read in a lot of books that it's just the reverse. And so for me, it comes down to how you reconcile all the correspondences. And that's where I've been getting hung up, because numerologically, to me, I've always gone 1 to 10, 10 being completion, right? Achievement.
Mhm.
And so why would the master be 3 and the apprentice be 8? That's like backwards to me, because the master should come towards the end, right? The mastery of your suit, and not the other way around. Um, and and it's interesting when you look at books, like for example, the Pictorial Key, which I reference from time to time on here. It actually puts the cards in that order. It goes 10 down to 1 in when it describes it. And in her book, The 78 Degrees of Wisdom, Rachel Pollack does the same thing when she talks
Okay.
about the cards and she relates them one to another. She talks
Mhm.
about them going in that direction: 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you were counting that way numerologically, to me, then it would make sense that the 8 would be the apprentice and the
Mm.
3 would be the master. But I've always looked at it the other way, going 1 up to 10, 10 being completion. And so I feel like the 8 should be the master and the 3 should be the apprentice. And so I spent a long time looking at that and exploring that, so much so that I had all of the notes for the 8 like a long time ago. I added maybe 2 words to this week as I studied it again, because I had to study it when I was studying the 3, so that I
Okay.
could
Yeah.
kind of reconcile those in my head. And I guess what it comes down to for me is that the 3 is about teamwork, whereas the 8 is about doing the thing yourself. And so whether it's master and apprentice or apprentice and master isn't really relevant to me anymore, because this card is about, working together, getting feedback to perfect things. The master doesn't work alone. The master has to get approval of those who are paying for things, right? And then for this one, it's more about that work ethic, that repetitiveness of improving yourself and mastering the thing that you need to master. Because whether you are the master or the apprentice, that's something that you're always going to be working at, right? Making
Mhm.
things a little better, gaining a little more skill than you did before. And so I guess for me personally, I've had to drop that idea of master and apprentice as I look at these cards,
Yep. Okay.
in favor of the other aspects of the card, so I can reconcile all my correspondences, right? Because I don't like to just place, okay, so I'm gonna place numerology on it, and then I'm gonna place astrology on it. I'm like, I want those to go together in my brain.
Yeah.
I
So
have to
just
reconcile things.
linking in now, having like some actual live thoughts here happening in my head. Um, Numerology, because I do that as well. So 8 being made up of either 2 4s, that balance aspect that I think I alluded to earlier with the star tarot, but then also the fact that it's made up of a 3 and a 5, and 5s being kind of overcoming difficulties, and 3 being that creativeness, whatever you want to do it, collaboration, creativeness. So if you put the collaboration and the difficulty together, you get that obstacle to overcome, which brings in, I suppose, that element of the Hierophant, which has clearly, actually, now we've talked about it, been explained throughout some of these cards today, something I've never looked at and noticed before. So yes, that does bring in a little bit of, it makes something click in my head. I can't explain it any better than that, but I still don't think I see the numerological aspect run 10 to 1 yet. I can like pull the additions, put the numbers together, see the pattern, and then see what it might create if you put them together. But no, I can't go 10 to 1.
Yeah, me either. It makes more sense 1 to 10 to me, for me too. So yeah, and that Hierophant comes in because we associate this with Virgo being very much that prudent person, or energy, having a strong work ethic and focus on what they're doing. Um, so that's where we get that. So all this, so we've talked a lot about um, work ethic and
Mhm.
productivity and uh, those types of things, discipline. But on the shadow side of this, how do you see this card?
So the shadow side, my first teaching was the Light Seer's Eight of Pentacles, and that showed me that overdoing it, spending too much time doing something, burning that candle both ends. So it wasn't just you doing it in the daytime, you'd maybe doing it at nighttime. This one, for me at the time, I think I might have been doing a course at work. So obviously I was at work, then I was coming home, and I was putting like long hours in to create the course, or to complete the course, do the study that was needed, write the essays. And then there wasn't a lot of play in there as well, trying to like fit everyone in, and I had no balance to my life at that point. And that card sort of, to me, it looked like that girl, that was me, although it wasn't herbs on my desk. I wasn't doing anything fun. It was like piles of books and study and screens and pens, and that was, at some points, that was where I felt my life lived 7 days a week. And for my waking hours, and there wasn't a lot more going on in there. Food was just fuel. It's like if it was in the microwave and I could have it in 3 minutes, perfect. But there was no like time to sit and be mindful about what I was eating and take that moment to digest your food. Because you can make yourself really quite ill if you're just like snatching food, shoving it in your body. You're not, it's not just about work. That is also about your mindfulness, your body, your spirit, everything else around you in the material realm, as well as what you're doing. So yeah, so that's my shadow aspect to that, is I personally burn myself out.
Yeah, well, some of the people that I read will look at it as, an interruption of the energy that is displayed in the card. So if this is about diligence and strong work ethic and everything, then this may be an interruption of that. Perhaps you're idle, or perhaps you have no focus, or you have lack of interest. There's also that idea of perfectionism, which taking that, improving things too far, to the point that you are just dissatisfied no matter what. Perhaps some other things that I've read and heard people talk about is perhaps being a know-it-all. Like, you don't need to practice because you got it, right? And you can't learn anything new. And an interesting one that came up, and I forget where I read this was the idea that instead of doing it yourself, you pay someone else to do it. And
that'd be nice.
and I'm like, yeah, that would be great. I would love for someone else to draw the images I have in my brain for this deck, right?
Yeah.
Which is why I'm mocking it up with Creative Commons imageries, because I just don't feel like I have the skill to illustrate them the way I want to. And this card has been very relevant, I guess, to this process for me, and to where I'm at the moment. I really find myself wanting to be idle all the time during this time of year, and not necessarily work so diligently. So let's look a little bit at what I did. My pug has decided that he wants to go out just at the wrong time. No, baby, stop. But I when I looked at this, I thought, well, the obvious thing to do would be to show this process of creating cards. And which is something that we get very much in the Out of Hand and The Pocket Appears from Jamie Sawyer. And when I looked back at my cards that I had depicted, oddly enough, the one that I had the most variations of was the Three of Pentacles, because I went through this whole process of trying to just get it right, because I kept conflating it and the Eight in my mind. And so I had started out with, this very abstract concept of work and combining of elements, air, fire, and water, to produce earth, this kind of Kabbalistic idea. And then I combined that with the mountain, for that earthiness. And finally added the people to it, maybe, making it a flag on the mountaintop, that thing we're working for. in the 3 at least. And in the end, I went with a more Smith-Waite version of the 3 of Pentacles,
Hmm.
and finally decided that this person in black here just blended too much and had went with purple. I don't know that that's how it's going to stay. Now I'm thinking it may be a third shade of darker gray, but I had so many of them, including here's one on parchment, which is what the parchment is what the backs of the cards have on them. I decided that that would be a option for depicting this card. Me and my creative process going through variation after variation to come to the form that I wanted for my 3 of Pentacles, basically. Um, and it has that interesting correlation for me, that struggle to understand the difference between those 2 cards, the 3 and the 8, that continual study and repeating things, and also with these images, because I feel like that's really been the process for this deck creation for me, has been I'll start with an idea and then I'll get another idea and I'll start and I'll work on it for a little bit, and sometimes I end up combining 2 different concepts, and sometimes I end up throwing one out,
Hmm.
and then I get feedback from people like you and I change it again. um, and so I really, as I said, like right now, wanting to hibernate, I put this together basically in one go, and I haven't played with it.
Well, I
Uh,
love the fact that you've got the 3 of Pentacles on the computer screen there in the laptop whilst he's looking up at the board of all the other ideas. Like, I love that. The whole concept of this card, I think it's genius.
so I may play with it a little bit more to make them actually, drafts, like maybe put a white border where they're printed on paper, or maybe make them rounded like their cards. And I still have to play with the one on the computer screen to get it like at an angle and that type of thing. But generally, I think I'm pretty happy with how it looks at the moment for my draft.
Mm.
And as I've said many times, this whole deck may change as I go through and finalize all the imagery at the end. But for now, I'm happy with the way it turned out based on my study and what we've been talking about. I have 14 cards left, and one of those is the Sun, which we're going to be doing on January 1st. But I still have 13 that I have to actually work on. And one of those I will be talking about with Amber Highland from Ancient Voices over on Instagram, and also publisher of the Cartomancer. And so, because there's so few and it's hard to shuffle and draw, why don't you choose a card 1 through 13 that we'll work on next week?
Well, now I'm going to be a pain in the backside, and I'm going to say 28. So you have to go through once and back again.
Oh my goodness. So 13, 26, 27, 28. Okay, so this is another one that interestingly I've been a little bit dreading, because I'm not sure how I'll depict it and relate it to my life, because that's one of the important things for me. And that is the A of
Oh,
Wands. Interestingly, I was thinking today about cards that I've completed, and in the eights, this was the last 8. So we'll now have 4 8s. So next week we'll be looking at all 4 of the 8s together.
is that 3 in a row?
I there was actually a card in between,
Ah,
because we've done the 8s very closely together. We did the
yeah,
8 of Swords, and then we have also done the 8 of Cups recently with Jonathan
Jonathan.
Daly, and and then we did the 8 of Pentacles today, and now moving on to the 8 of Wands, which interestingly is one of the few. It might be the only one. I have to go back and double check. Cards that doesn't actually have a person in it.
No, there
Uh,
are a couple of decks, and I can't remember who it is. There's one where there's
but
people
in
in
the
them flying.
RWS, in the
Mm,
RWS, I think it's the only one without
yes.
a person in it. And I know that a lot of creators will continue that tradition when they create it. They may add animals or that type of thing, or you might see a person's hand, but you don't usually see a person in this card for whatever reason.
No,
But
this
I
will
will
be
be chatting
interesting.
with Amber about that next week. Thank you so much for being here. Is there anything coming up soon over on your channel that you'd like to tell people about?
There isn't, because I've been so busy in work. We've had a lot of on-call and things I've had to cover. So I'm just away with that. And I've got a bit of family issues. Some people are in hospital. Some people have just come out of hospital. People having operations. And, life is starting to get a bit busy. But I might be popping onto, I don't know if you've heard of her. There's this person called Rosemary over at Good Journeys Tarot. And she's having like a little New Year's bash online. And I might, if I can get away from my on-call, pop into that one.
That would be great. Yes, everybody is welcome to pop into that one and share your favorite sun cards on January 1st as we enter the new year. I thought we'd start with a happy card, especially since it's one that I've had. It was the first card I created before I even started this 78 cards in 78 weeks. So until then, everyone, good journeys.
Thank you for coming, everyone.